We're getting close, but we have a ton yet to do. Time for the next episode. All right, so let's talk about setting up flap linkages for a minute. When you go to do flaps in your models, you want to make sure that you get all your surfaces put together first. You want to make sure that your servo's in and powered up, and that you have your transmitter set up so that way this thing functions. All right, and you have it on the switch that you want. So that thing is exactly where I need it to be at this point. Now, the reason we do this in these steps is because if this thing mechanically binds up, you can smoke a digital servo really, really fast. So we don't want to have any linkages on there to start, none. Get your transmitter set up, make sure this thing functions, and then I just take a arm and just stick one of the servo arms on there. And now I'm going to operate my transmitter and make sure that thing moves the way it wants. With flaps, I'm using the factory arms here for my Free Sky servos. So I'm going to have mine set up in this fashion. Now that I know that the arm works the way I want to, typically with flaps, we have these things offset to a direction like that. So once we get that arm pushed on there, all right, we can articulate that, make sure again, all right, yep, that works just the way I want to. Now we're going to go ahead and work on that mechanical adjustment. In this case, I have to bend the rod here a little bit to keep that angle really nice. And I had to use a metal clevis because I can't use a ball link here because the nut winds up hitting on the servo. If you have a higher sitting servo arm, that won't be an issue for you. Something else I want to discuss quick, if you're ever using metal clevises, you need jam nuts for those. You don't want those threads being stressed from all that force back and forth on those threads. Will wind up eventually stripping the clevis, or the threads off of that rod, vice versa, and it'll pull it off. So we always want to use a jam nut on those, and then we want to make sure that that thing is nice and tight. So let's go ahead and get our servo arm now tightened down and get our mechanical adjustment where we need it. All right, now that we know that we have our adjustment finalized, let's go ahead and test those. Half flaps and full flaps. And if you needed more flap deflection, we have plenty of room because we started from that back angle. So there you go. I always put my flaps also on a delay, so that way they don't make super abrupt changes to your model when it's in flight. So hopefully that helps you guys. All right, I put these collars, I've marked them so that way we're not going to hit the trunnion down there, which is they give you a spec from there to there, then here to here. It really doesn't matter as long as this one clears the trunnion. So I marked center for the hole. I marked an edge right there so I know where the collar is. That one as well. And then this thing I laid up here. It's going to go right at the bottom of that 84. I made 2 lines there for that, but I put this in loosely first. So this thing's going to sit when it's closed, like right there. And then this is all going to be based, as you can see off of there. And it'll help you to be able to drill your 2 holes under the underside. So, and then I've made marks so I know where everything is center-wise, where it's going to sit. And then the last thing I'm going to do is glue in the hinges. And you can adjust this up or down to fine-tune that edge. All right, piece of tape right under the 84, both sides marked. Made a hole for the collar, and I marked center. So now you could take this thing, peel this off. We're going to lay that on there. We know where to drill. There you go. So let's drill those, and we'll get this all set up. Now they want you to use this little plastic spacer and screw. Again, Viton washer, countersunk screw. We're going to put that thing through there, put a little dab of canopy glue on there. I just like that at times much better than the Loctite. And then we're going to thread that down into our piece. This way they don't vibrate loose. Now, test fit of this piece. So you could see we have a little bit of a gap. We're higher up than I want to be. So all we're going to do is, you can, I guess, leave those tight. Let's put up our retract. And then we just loosen up the side screws and we slide this a little bit. All right, I like that. So let's go ahead and then we'll epoxy in our hinges. All right, let's go ahead and get these things epoxied into place. It almost looks like my thing's coming apart there a little bit. So we're gonna put some glue in there and squeeze that. All right, let's go ahead and start getting some epoxy put in where it needs to be. So I'm just squeezing some of that stuff in there. Toothpick. Work it around. Then we're going to go ahead and slide in our hinges. Like so. And I want to be able to see the hinge here, guys. So you don't want to shove it all the way over the top of the hinge because then it ain't going to open. There's that. Let's go do the others. All right, it's been a few days. Let's go ahead and get Retracts up and get that wax paper out of there. That looks really good. Really nice sturdy base in there. We're not worried about now that tire or the axle or anything pushing through that sheeting. So that looks good. So let's start tidying up wires here, and then we're going to be off to the next stages. All right, so we are going to be using the mini servos for this door actuation. These are the 5301s. So get this thing all put together, and then we're also going to get the servo mounted into here. Again, notice how I mark the tape. I'll take this one off and then I'll just rip this one. That way we always know where those doors go back, so you don't get a mixed up wing for wing, aileron for flap, or just backwards. And just because I know which arm you're going to ask, these come in Futaba servo boxes or King Max servo boxes. I used one of those. 3/4 of an inch arms. All right, so let's talk about gear door linkage, because you can smoke these digital servos just as quick as you can flap servos if you don't do this right. So it took me a while to find arms that I like to work with this linkage, but without hooking it up, get your retracts to work, operate your retracts so they come down into here, and don't hook this up. Let this stuff go and make sure that it's not bottoming out in here against the wing, and make sure the rod itself isn't bottoming out. That thing should be able to pivot down at the bottom. If that S bend or Z bend is really long, it'll dig into the wood and still bind this up and give you an issue, and it's under here and you don't even know it. And that thing can get super hot, amp out, wind up crashing the receiver, all those bad types of things, right? So make sure that that all works okay. If all that looks good, then let's go ahead and operate this. Try not to get it caught here. All right. Once you know that that thing works appropriately, go ahead and hook it up. Now, the other thing that we need to talk about is making sure that you have the right servo travel. Normally, servos are, I think it was 120 in operation in degrees. You can limit the programmable servos by just taking that thing and hooking it up to the S port there in the back. And then we wind up going into, let's go into settings, device config, you go into servos, you would go into Xact, and then the range, you can change that from 120 to 90. You can change the direction just by hooking those right up into that S port into the back and going into this mode. When you get down to the bottom, make sure you hit save to flash, because otherwise it'll reset as soon as you unplug the power. So I hope that helps you guys, but you need to make sure that these things don't over travel and dig in and ruin your sheeting and or, you know, stall down here and amp out in your receiver. Now, the next step in setting your gear doors is you want this long to start. You don't want to start short and wind up ripping the wood off of this thing, or wind up again stalling the servo because it's trying to pull this gear door cover down and it can't. So leave it long. We don't have a nut on the back, so let's actuate this. Okay, so we're long, right? And that's what we want. Now we adjust from there until it's flat. That will keep you from ruining your servos. All right, now that you have your push rods pushed through the other end, you may have to take these things and then just go with an X-Acto knife and just do that so it bevels that end, and that will make this thing easier to start. We're also going to mount this way, not this way, because that extra raise is going to pull that rod up and we don't want that. So we're going to keep this thing almost down in, and it's just going to have a much better feel to it. All right, we have our ball links installed. We have our servos for elevator and rudder all set up on our receiver. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get these horns put on, and these are just the Free Sky horns that come in the kit, like so. We're going to get those put into where they need to be, and we're going to find out exactly where we got to turn these links in order to get into the right hole. Again, we don't want them all the way out here because you lose torque as you go out, but you lose resolution. So like you just move your stick a little bit and the surface moves a lot. You want it almost equal, more stick, more movement. And that happens by keeping it closer, but there's less throw. So what we want to do is find out what hole will get us to where we need to be, but give us the throw that we need. So in conjunction of finding a hole, we'll be setting a throw meter back on the surfaces, and we will check to see is it going to be close, further out, and dial it into the one we need. All right, so we have all of our ball links hooked up. Hardware is pretty good here. This isn't Dubro level hardware, but the hardware is really good for this model. I had no issues with the 2.5 mil hardware. So we're going to go ahead and put our arms onto here. Really, if you don't want to use the arms from your standard servos, 1-inch arms would do you. All right, now before we go ahead and we reverse those, we have to make sure that they travel correctly in the gyro. So we're going to have to go in through our setup menu and do that before we reverse them. All right, and here's what that final install looks like. So you have your motor wires coming up through the bottom, connected through our ESC here. ESC is going to have air rolling through here, through the ESC this way, and I'm going to make some nice vent holes out of the back of that engine cover, motor cover in here. We have our FAS 100 sensor in here. I put in just 2 small holes. We'll run a zip tie and 3M dual lock underneath. Fasten the wires down so that looks pretty in the inside of there. And this idea, I've been working with a friend of mine. His name is Nino. He's from up in the Connecticut area. Shout out to him. He shared a picture with me, somebody off of RC groups. I'm not a big forum guy. I don't spend a lot of time there, but he ran his wire through here, and I thought that was a great idea. It keeps too much wire through the wheel well area. But we have our motor wires, ESC wire, and sensor wires in the front, the rest of the controls in the back. That comes up into here. We'll do rubber grommet around just so that doesn't roll through. You can always slit right down the side fuel tubing. That'll work just fine in there. All of our cables come through and up and under really nice, and we're using our Hansen Hobby connectors. So our, God, what are those called? Polarized connectors. So these are all of our polarized connectors that'll hook up into here. I'm going to show you guys in past videos what that looks like here through that clip, and we're going to make all those harnesses so they're all the right length, not too much wire bundled up in there that doesn't need to be, and we're getting there. So we have one done, one down, one to go. When you go to drill this hole, just drill, I don't know, maybe about 5 mil behind that bolt right there for reference, okay, coming into the wing, and that'll bring you out into here, and you'll be able to look through there and be able to see on the inside where you need to drill more in order to get that stuff to all come through. You'll get it. All right, now that our wings are done, we're going to make wing bolts, and I use spacers, the appropriate 4 mil bolts. All right, so those are going to go like that. We'll epoxy the spacers on. You can use metal, plastic, whatever works. And from McMaster-Carr, I get these cap screw covers. These are 4 mil ones. And basically what I do is I put a drop of CA in the inside of that, and we're going to use the vise, and we're going to press these into place. All right, once you have those things epoxied on there, let's just go ahead and get them screwed in so that way that pressure holds them nice and tight. And I didn't make the epoxy anywhere down near the thread, so I don't have to worry about the stuff getting stuck in there. It's just up in the metal and around the plastic housing that I put on. So thread those down in there. Just quick cure epoxy, 5-minute stuff. I'll let that get in there nice and solid. Now we have our wing bolts. So now that the wiring is all finished up for being roughed in, we have nose gear. We have to get that put into place. We have our steering and our front nose light. So we have to get that done, but not non-essential for now. So for now, what I want to do is get this, let's get it flipped over, and let's get our flaps set up and our gear doors, retracts, and get ailerons done. All right, we're going to get the nose gear in. The first thing I did was take the landing gear light out, and I put in a uni light in the back of that thing, so that way we're all on the same voltage and everything would work accordingly. That, I just ground out the back, glued that in, not a big deal. Now we're going to take this, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put those in there. I am going to Loctite these in. I may even wind up putting a nut on the backside just to ensure they stay there. We have lock washers, Loctite, that'll go on these brackets, 6 of them in there, and then that will wind up going on each side. Let's get it done. All right, for the servo bracket, I had to open that up for my servo to fit, but then the holes weren't lining up with the servo. So the only way this is going to work, I had to open mine all the way up, and basically I'm going to just take my servo, drop it through, and I'm going to sandwich it. You could build yourself a servo plate on the backside if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that. I mean, it's just steering. So let me show you. So if I put that in there, I'm just going to washer that and nut it on the backside, and we should be just fine. Servo is mounted in there, so we're going to go ahead and drop this thing in and then get our Allen started. We're going to go ahead and install the nose wheel. We've ground down again the end of the axle. That's where our wheel collar is going to go. You're going to use the brass bushings in here. So you're going to put that in, then a brass bushing, then the wheel, then that in the other side, wheel collar on the outside. All right, to get the nacelles mounted, we're measuring 70 mil up to there on both sides. We're going to come in a little bit. The goal is that I'm going to use, again, rubber Viton washers to really support that fiberglass, hopefully not break it, but still bite into the wood with my own countersunk wood screws. If you flip this over, on the other side is the flap, and you can epoxy, or you just thin CA around there, whatever it is you want to do. So let's go ahead and get this done. That'll keep it tight. A little vibration isolation. I like that. And then I'll show you, we're going to do the other side here. All right, here we can see, pop you off. There you can see where those screws come through there and there. So those things, if you want to drop a little thin CA on there, or even some thick CA, we should be okay. All right. All right, let's get our other holes drilled here in the bottom. All right, for these covers, we're going to have to make a couple more holes. So that actually fits in there really nice. We're just going to hold it into place. All right, now you can also see that I opened up those in the back to let airflow, because there are paths from the front into here to exit some of that air off the motor. So it's not completely sealed off in there. So open those up. Otherwise, the Viton washers are a good look underneath. And if you wanted to, you could put a piece of sticky tape or something in there, or if you want, you can even glue this to that, but you'd have to take them other two screws out or make holes here in order to get to those. I didn't. Those four seem to be with the glue in there, the thin CA, really tight, but it gives it a nice clean look. We have this all to epoxy up here later, so off to the other wing. All right, and there you have it. That is a wrap on our Seagull model Cessna 310, available right here at Gator-RC. So equipment rundown on this: Sunny Sky Motors 5100 Gen Ace packs, Castle Creations 100 amp ESCs, Free Sky TDS R18 FAS 100, 5301 and 5401 servos in this thing, JP Retracts that are made for this plane, purchased separately. They don't come in the kit. So and then uni lights. So what an outstanding project for me to go through. Honestly, like I said before, more time in programming than putting together. We had the information I shared with the motors at the beginning of these videos. So all of that being said, we got more snow. Can't wait to get this outside and the Odyssey to do some testing and tuning and get some of the callings and warnings and telemetry stuff dialed in. But what an outstanding project. The quality on this plane, it just feels really good. It looks really good, and I'm excited. I can't wait to get this thing out to the field. So this will be my first twin. So with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap up and get out of here. If you love these videos, do me a favor, smash that like button. If you did not, and you're going to give me one of these, I deserve 2 of those, right? If you're bad, you get twice as many. So with that being said, like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell to this page. We also run, so we have the Just Plain Crazy YouTube channel and Gator-RC. Make sure you go and subscribe to that, because we share other information on there. As far as Facebook and Instagram, you'll find both platforms. Make sure you're subscribed. The newsletter at Gator-RC is super informative to get all of the sales info if you're not a big Facebook guy. So make sure you're checking that out. And then we have Instagram on both and TikTok on just the Just Plain Crazy site. So tons of media out there, to suit everybody. So if this Seagull model Cessna 310 is something that interests you, or just Balsa ARFs altogether, stuff that's ready for covering, head on over to www.gator-rc.com. Full one-stop hobby shop. You can check out this plane or a plethora of others. So if you were into Sebart, Top RC models, Seagulls models, you're into a couple of the foamies I have behind me, the Rage RC stuff is also super cool. There's a million different planes for you to choose on. There are so many different product lines. So with that being said, guys, it's Brendan here at Gator-RC. I appreciate you guys for following along with me, but we got to get out of here and get off to that next project. So with that being said, we will see you later, alligator.